On today's Story Beat.
It's all about your network and who you know, and so I'm a firm believer in whatever it is you want to accomplish. If you want to be a country guitarist, or you want to be a songwriter, or you want to do music and TV and film, you have to be around the people that are doing what you want to be doing, and ideally be around people that are successful, and you can kind of learn from them, glean from them, maybe get opportunities from them eventually.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, the brilliant jazz guitarist Adam Hawley, has had 9 #1 hits. In 2015, Adam signed with Kalimba Music, which was founded by Maurice White of Earth, Wind & Fire. His first offering on the Kalimba label featured Brian Culbertson, Gerald Albright, Euge Groove, Darius and Michael Lington. And in 2016, Adam was named both Smooth Jazz News and Jazz Trax Debut Artist of the Year. Adam's third release, Escape, features guest appearances by Najee, Braun, Michael Lington, Marcus Anderson, Jeff Ryan, and Kat Hawley. Adam has also been a guitarist to the stars, appearing with a who's who of artists in a wide variety of genres, including appearing with such extraordinary talents like Dave Koz, Jennifer Lopez, Brian Culbertson, Natalie Cole, Brian McKnight, and on American Idol, to name but a few. He holds a Doctorate of Musical Arts from the University of Southern California and currently teaches at Musicians Institute, Chaffey College, and Saddleback College. Adam has played at many jazz festivals, including Java Jazz, the Newport Beach Jazz Festival, Catalina Jazz Fest, the Dave Koz Cruise, the Smooth Jazz Cruise, and Earl Klugh's Weekend of Jazz. For more, check out adamhawley.com. And please be sure to stick around at the end of today's show for a very special treat. Adam has lent us the title track off his CD, The Exquisite, Risin Up. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm truly honored to welcome one of the very best jazz guitarists working in the business today, Adam Hawley. Adam, thanks for joining me on StoryBeat.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. Trust me. All right. So you've been working at this performance thing for a while. You've been a writer and a producer for quite some time. I'm just wondering, where did this all begin? So let's go back and look at, where did you first start playing the guitar and thinking about music as something to do with your life?
Yeah, I grew up in Oregon, rural Oregon, and there wasn't a whole lot to do. So, I ended up finding my parents' record collection, and they had some vinyl records. And I definitely remember finding Earth, Wind & Fire, Brothers Johnson, Elvis. They had all the Time Life cassettes of the different years of the 60s, and so I just really had a love early on for oldies, for funk, R&B of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and somewhere in there I found the guitar. I heard it just spoke to me, and so as long as I can remember, wanted to play the guitar.
So what did you do? Did you say to your parents, would you get me a guitar, or did you borrow one, or how'd you first start?
Yeah, so definitely I kept asking, and my mom, I think she was a little concerned with the notion of sex, drugs, rock and roll, or something like that. So instead of guitar, she made a deal with me. She said, if you take classical piano for a year, I'll let you play the guitar.
Okay.
And I think she thought I might not stick with it, but I did. I was adamant, and I'm actually really glad she started me on the piano, because I play more piano now than anything else, just by virtue of working in the studio now and producing and writing for so many different people.
Do you compose on the piano versus the guitar?
I do. It's definitely more often on the piano.
And that's guitar. Because you got the whole orchestra in the piano. Is that why?
That's true, but it depends on the genre too. So like rock and roll or different guitar oriented styles, definitely a lot of the songs start on the guitar, but contemporary jazz is very much R&B, gospel, jazz oriented, and all of those tend to start those styles, even though I'm a guitarist as the lead instrument, but the composition, the chordal structure, it all starts on the piano. So
I've heard this very frequently said that composers, even if their principal instrument is something else, they will compose on the piano because it has so much a wider range than certain instruments. Not that you can't do a whole lot on a guitar, obviously.
Yeah, and then also just even if it's not the final part that you play on the record, you have the chordal structure in your right hand and the bass notes in your left, and if you have a little drum groove going, you've got a whole band right there. So.
Well, for sure. So when I listen to you play, I can tell that you love what you do. It comes through, it exudes out of the speakers. How much does passion for music factor into what you do? Well,
it's everything. As I was mentioning, it's all I could ever remember wanting to do. And there never was a second thought of, and it was quite a discussion, between me and my parents. Neither of them are musicians. And just the thought of doing this for a living was very bizarre to them. And
sure.
So, they kept on it. Hey, you'd be a great lawyer. You'd be a great judge. You'd be a great doctor. And I have to give them credit. They were supportive, took me, drove me to all those lessons growing up and let me study music in college. I did end up doing a business minor at their behest, which I'm actually really glad I did. That was actually a really great experience, taking 8 classes in the Marshall School of Business. But
I'm sure it helped you. And by the way, I too am a Trojan. I graduated from USC.
Fight on! All right.
Absolutely. So you how much training did you have? Did you go take lessons right away early on?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I was playing piano by 8, and then started guitar at 9, and took lessons all the way up until college, and then I moved to Los Angeles to go to USC and studied in the Thornton School of Music, and that was fantastic. And I ended up doing my bachelor's, master's, and doctorate all back to back. And
that's a long haul to do all 3 of those degrees back to back, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not typical. Most people leave
and come back. Sure.
Yeah, they'll go out and do something professionally, or they'll teach, and then they'll come back. I kind of thought to myself, if I leave, I'll never come back. That was kind of in my mind. And so I kind of felt like while I'm in kind of the academic mode of writing papers and going to class and kind of, it's easier to kind of just keep going along that path. And but it was pretty wild. Once I started my doctorate, I also started touring at the same time. I got the gig with the Manhattan Transfer. And for a moment, I was wondering, what should I do? Should I continue on and do my doctorate? Should I start touring? And I got really lucky because they had a schedule that was very conducive to staying in school. Most of their long tours were during Christmas break or summer break, and otherwise we'd be out on weekends. So I did both. During my entire doctorate, I was on the road 100 days a year with the Manhattan Transfer.
That's amazing. Most people could not do that because doctorates require a huge amount of effort. And did you find yourself exhausted at the end of it, or were you enervated by it?
No, I was exhausted, definitely. So it was definitely nice to graduate. And I ended up taking me a little bit longer. I originally planned to do my doctorate in 2 years, which is possible, but it just got to be so hectic by the end that I ended up, kind of taking an extra semester, which I was still ahead of schedule. Most people takes 3+ years to do it, so I still finished a semester early. But no, it was very intense because I'd be in Europe, taking finals. I remember one tour, I would stay up all night in the hotel and do my homework. And then we would always have like a 5 a.m. Bus call. And then I would sleep on the bus for like 2 or 3 hours till we got to the next city. And so it was a lot of that, finishing a final project in Tel Aviv and I remember taking a theory final in Slovakia. So it was pretty wild, but I'm glad I did it, because I was able to concurrently work on both of those disciplines of building my touring resume and building my academic resume, which are both important. And I really don't look at them as separate. They really come together as a part of my career, and I'm passionate with both. And I'm still teaching. I teach at Saddleback College right now, and it's great. I teach there on Mondays, and that gives me the rest of the week to work on production. I have the weekend open to go tour. So it's always been a plan to have both of those, floating around.
I suspect that the fact that you did those 3 degrees right back to back to back has held you in good stead in terms of being a touring artist, because you had to be disciplined all the way through. And to be a touring artist, my assumption is you have to have a certain degree of discipline as well, personal discipline. Yeah,
definitely. And, earlier in my career, when I was a guitarist to a lot of different people, that's also a different thing than what I'm doing now. The last 7 years, focusing on my own career, it's all about pushing that vision forward. But yeah, there's a lot of discipline in making sure you have personality, but still stay true to whatever artist you're working with, their ideal of what their show would be, how their music is going to sound. Of course, the details too of just showing up on time, learning the music.
Exactly.
Surprisingly, a lot of people have trouble with that. A lot of people are very talented but miss the key components, which is just being professional.
That was my point, is that if you were on tour and getting a doctorate at the same time, and forgive me, by the way, for not calling you Dr. Hawley at the beginning of the show.
Sure.
But if you're able to do that, you can probably, as they say, do almost anything, because that discipline is strict. You've got to, it's nose to the grindstone all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, and a lot, I always tell people that touring, the music shouldn't be the hard thing. That should be, hopefully, you have a discipline on your instrument, and that comes easy. The challenge to me is everything else. It's the travel, dealing with different personalities, making sure you yourself are just somebody that other people want to be around, let alone you being able to get along with other people. So a lot of those are often the bigger challenges than the music, I find, for sure.
Well, the latter thing you just said, I think that's a huge one. I think a lot of people lose careers because they just can't get along with other people. And that's just a part of being in the entertainment business. Although I would submit it's a part of being in almost any business.
Sure.
But in show business, it's truly important, because most of the time it's all about interactions with people that you're on stage with or working with off stage, one of the two. So, all right, what have you learned about playing guitar over the years that you wish you'd known from the start? What have you learned? Anything recently that you thought, wow, I wish I knew this 10 years ago?
Well, I'm very jealous of my students now that have YouTube, because everything is at your fingertips. All of these, not only the original recordings, but you can also see somebody play a song 20 different times from 20 different concerts. And more importantly, as a guitarist, you can see their fingers. And on the guitar, there's different areas you can play the same notes. It's kind of an unusual thing about the guitar compared to some other instruments. Whereas the piano, if you want to play middle C, there's only one place to play that. On the guitar, it exists 5 different places. So I'm really jealous about that, because I spent so much time racking my brain. How did they play this? How did they do this? Now you can just pull it up. And so I've had to correct some solos I've learned back in the day, and like, oh man, I was playing that completely wrong. But on the flip side, I think there was a charm and an urgency that created too, with having to really dig for the information. So I think that can be a tricky thing too now, is that the information is so readily available. What do you focus on? I remember that was one thing, I guess, the innocence of it, I kind of look back and am charmed by it, is that, I only had like a few CDs or a few cassettes to check out. And so I would just live with those. Now with streaming, you can literally listen to anything that's ever been recorded. So where do you focus? So it's interesting, but I think do
you think there's a negative to having too much?
Well, I think it's more so just figuring out how to filter and decide what is it you're going to do. For instance, when I started my solo career, several people asked me that, because until I had made a record, you could have wondered, well, what direction is Adam going to go? Because I had appeared in so many different settings, playing rock and blues and straight ahead jazz and fusion. And fortunately, I was respected in all of those genres. So I remember a lot of people saying, well, you could do anything. What are you going to do? And so I think that's important. At some point, is finding a focus and deciding this is what I'm going to do, because it makes it more special. But I think it helps the listeners too. Listeners need some sort of focus. They're not necessarily consciously thinking, oh, this album's all over the place, but they might just think, I don't know, it doesn't quite hit me. Next, Whereas if you can have a theme to what you're doing, it definitely helps. It's marketing.
Well, it is absolutely marketing. It's great. You are clearly a jack of all trades when it comes to the guitar, but it is that you're probably best known as a master of the jazz guitar, and so that style of music, if you want to call it that. And I think that you're right. From a marketing perspective, that's what people will gravitate toward. That's what they'll go buy your records from that.
Yeah, I think it's just helpful to kind of pick a lane and stick to it. And that was easy. It was easy for me because I've always been a fan of contemporary jazz. George Benson and Norman Brown and Paul Jackson Jr. and Chuck Loeb, and there's so many incredible guitarists, and then saxophonists Kirk Whalum and Gerald Albright, and and pianists Bob James and Joe Sample and George Duke. I mean, I've been a huge fan of the genre of just this whole concept. Was just magical to me of combining jazz harmony but having a groove to it, having an R&B feel. And it was like, man, this is like, when I discovered the genre, I was like, this is amazing. It's everything that I like all in one, And so it was really fascinating to me. So it wasn't a stretch for me to decide, okay, and plant my flag. This is where I'm going to put my focus.
What for you makes a good piece of music good? What defines it for you?
Well, definitely, especially me being a producer, I really listen to how are all the instruments interacting with each other. That's always important to me, So just in terms of how the song is constructed, definitely melody is key. Melody is everything. So if you have a strong melody, you're on the right track. Groove is important. But I'm always listening to the mix, the master, those type of things too are super important to me because I live and die by those elements every day as well. So, all those components are super important because I'm also thinking about the success of a song, and not only my own songs that I release, but the ones I do for my clients. And all those elements have to be there. You can have a great melody, but if it's not executed well, or it's not mixed well, or it's not mastered well, the song can die on the vine. So it's definitely a combination of all of those.
And for you, you need to have that full entity in order for it to feel successful to you. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. And really, I think it's a good thing. Nowadays, most music that comes out is of a really high level. So, you can't put out something mediocre and really expect really good results out of it, because now the listeners are sophisticated too. They're used to hearing, great sounding recordings. I mean, the technology is such where you can do all this at your home studio and make a really fantastic sounding recording. And so, yeah, all those elements are important, and I go back to my first record, the litmus test for me was, okay, who is my competition? Or at that time, hoping it would be my competition, but, so I would pull down songs from Norman Brown and from all these different artists and then put mine in a playlist, and does it match up, and until it did, I was like, okay, we're not quite there. And then once it started sounding like, oh man, these songs belong together. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. And I'm glad I waited, because the first album ended up doing really well for me. So I'm glad I didn't, do it prematurely, for sure.
I think for the listeners, what you just said is extraordinarily important, that you matched your own work that you had produced up against successful artists already out there, and by
Correct.
Doing that, as you said, put it into a playlist with them. Does it match up or not? That's remarkably excellent advice for anyone who's trying to figure out whether they're in the mix, whether they're part of the world that they're trying to get into, or are they outside of it? American Idol is a great example of that. How many people at the beginning of every season of American Idol audition can't hit a note, or completely off key, and in the audition at some point they get dismissed and they walk away and they say, wait a minute, they don't understand how good I am. They haven't done the homework you're talking about.
Yeah, no, it's a great litmus test, because I remember, earlier I started on my first record in 2005, actually, even though it didn't come out until 2016. And I just remember I felt like the songs were good. And in fact, 3 of those songs that I wrote back in college in 2005 ended up on the record that came out in 2016. Wow. So it wasn't the composition, it was the execution and the mix and the production value. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty apparent, if you put something in a playlist and then just, start doing the dishes and then it randomly comes up, does it strike you as, it's almost like it's good if it doesn't, if it just kind of melds in, it feels like it belongs, So yeah, that definitely was a powerful tool for me.
How much, when you're creating music, do you think about the audience, or are you working to please yourself as you create?
Well, it's a mixture of both. And I think a lot of artists, they feel like it's almost like a dirty thing, like trying to please the audience. But I look at it from another perspective. I want to find that middle ground of where I enjoy the music I put out. It's meaningful to me, but it also connects with other people, because without an audience, what do we have? I'm just playing for myself,
Exactly.
And
Nothing.
it's more, I can tell you, it's more fun playing for people than not, and and so, I definitely pay attention to, trends and kind of what's working, what isn't. At the same time, I definitely make a point to, have a unique sound, and I went so far as to, play a different guitar than most contemporary jazz guitar players play. And then naturally I'm going to have a different sound, just because we all have different influences in terms of writing and whatnot. But that was another thing too. I mean, very early on, I had several big producers, reach out to me. They wanted to produce me, but I was like, well, you produce some of the great guitar players out there now. So if I hand my project over to you, I'm just going to sound like them, So from the very beginning, I also had a vision of what my sound was as a producer. And, but I have to say, that's a tricky thing. Some people are producers, some people aren't. And so you also have to know when to fold them, know when to hold them, know when to fold them. There's some people self-producing that really should focus on, just being an artist. And, for myself, that was always interesting to me. I also had the benefit of, playing all of the instruments of the rhythm section from an early age. I was playing drums and bass and piano and guitar and trumpet. So I also had a feel.
Do you do that now on your work? You play most of the instruments on the recordings?
I do pretty much all of the keyboards, all the guitars. I do a lot of the basses. On the new record, I'm playing bass on more than half of the songs. Drums I retired from. I played drums. The last time I played, I think, was maybe sophomore year of high school or junior year. So there's so many great drummers that I delegate that. But yeah, I play a lot of the instruments, and I like it. And like, for instance, keyboards, like I'm not a traveling working keyboard player per se, where I would go take a gig as somebody's, piano player. But, I kind of have little parts that I come up with. And that's kind of what I was referring to earlier, is that, making a song is a puzzle, and you got to have all these parts that fit and work together to make the song bigger and to make it feel good. And so sometimes having the most virtuosic piano player come in and play, I've done that, and then I muted it and put back what I did on the demo because it had a charm to it, So that's kind of part of it too, is the editing process, I guess I should refer to it as, is so huge. Is choosing what to use, what not to use. And sometimes brevity is everything.
Well, that goes back to the earlier question about passion. You're going to play the keyboard in a way that, in your mind's eye, in your mind's ear, I guess it would be, this is what it should sound like. And then somebody else comes in and puts their interpretation on it, and suddenly it's not quite what you expected. I assume that happens regularly.
No, 100%. Yeah. And there's a lot to that. The song is real to me, and I've been with it from its inception. So yeah, that's going to be a different, no matter how well-intentioned session player coming in, definitely I'll have, I always say I have my finger on the pulse of the music, and same with the mixing. I mix 99% of the music that I produce. And every once in a while, a client will be, oh, I've been using so-and-so forever. They've always mixed my records. I say, okay, but, I've been living with this song, and it's always different. This only happened maybe on 2 or 3 tunes, that I hadn't mixed but it'll come back and it's like, it's a good mix. Everything's in place, but it doesn't have the character that I was looking for, So no, I mean, there's definitely something to be said for, and this is why I'm such a, I look up to and such a huge fan of people like Stevie Wonder and Prince that just, they're one man band, one stop shop. They'll just get in there. Paul McCartney is another one. They'll play everything, write the song, play all the instruments, and it's a special thing. You get some really cool results that way.
I assume song arranging is extremely important to you. Yes.
Yeah.
And where did you learn how to arrange? In school?
Definitely a combination of studying and being in school, but also from a very early age, I had an 8-track recorder. It was made by Roland, and it recorded to zip disk. And it was so cool. I was maybe, 11 or 12, and I got this 8-track recorder. And so I would dissect existing songs and replay all the instruments and, make my own recording of it. So I remember, wow. I remember specifically doing Ventura Highway by America when I was like 11 or 12. So I went through and played everything, the drums and the bass and the piano and the guitar and sang all the vocals. And so I was kind of getting a handle of it, even as a preteen, in terms of just, how parts work together and whatnot. And so it was something I was fascinated with very early on. I remember I was very obsessed with the Beatles as a preteen. And I remember listening to their records over and over, but I would focus on different instruments. So I would listen to the bass all the way through Abbey Road. And then I'd listen to it again and only listen to the drums. And then listen to it again, only listen to the guitar. So I would always kind of from an early age kind of pick out different instruments and what their roles were.
And so once you have heard these layers, and you didn't have any technical capability of stripping away all the other tracks, you were listening to everything at one time, but your ear was focusing on those instruments during the song. Once you had all those layers in mind, how did you then figure out that you now put that sandwich together and it all works? How was there some epiphany for you when you went, oh, I see how that works?
Well, every song is a case-by-case basis. So definitely you start to develop a Rolodex in your mind of, oh, this song had these elements, and the song I'm now writing or working on has similar elements. So let's try that. So you definitely have some go-tos. It's kind of like having a toolbox, and you've got all these different tools. Do I need a Phillips or a flathead, or but at the same time, it also takes creativity and just having an ear for it, of just listening. Is this working or is it not? And that takes time. That doesn't happen overnight, but of just really sitting down and listening to the song, and does it feel good, or are things clashing? And sometimes those are mixed considerations. Sometimes it's volume, sometimes it's panning, sometimes it's depth in terms of reverb or effects. But sometimes it's just muting something. I remember I had one song where I had a guitar part and a bongo that were, obviously they're different instruments, but they had a similar rhythm. And it didn't matter what I did, panning or whatnot, it just didn't work. It just felt busy. And finally, I just muted the bongo, and it's like the track opened up, and it was like magic. It was like, oh my God, And so that was a great lesson, maybe 8, 9 years ago. And it was like, oh, sometimes it's just less is more. Sometimes it's not adding layers, sometimes it's taking away. So so I don't have one singular answer for you, but it's a combination of just recognizing what has worked in the past, but also being open to new possibilities.
And how important would you say it is that you started thinking about this as a young person, and that you experimented with certainly not the top end technical equipment, but you experimented with it, you played around with it. How important was it for you to start early on, to start playing with that stuff?
Oh yeah, it was huge. I mean, I like I said, I was recording at 11, 12, multi-track recording at 11 or 12. Before that, I just had a cassette player, and I would record a part, take the cassette out, put it in another stereo, and then hit play, and then get another cassette, and then record. So I'd record my guitar, plus what was playing from the other stereo. So I was overdubbing at like, I don't know, 8 or 7.
You were overdubbing. You were overdubbing what was coming out of the speakers. Is that what you were doing?
Right. Well, yeah, I didn't have any equipment, so So my first track was coming out of a speaker. My second track I was playing live, and so I remember doing that at I don't know, 10 or something. So
you were able to learn how to play counterpoint and all that just against your own stuff.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Huh. So no, but yeah, definitely having the equipment and diving in at an early age was huge, because when I got to college and had to start digging in deeper, and I remember getting the first M box when I was in college, and so it wasn't so foreign to me because I'd already been kind of getting my hands dirty a few years prior.
Were you writing new music way back then too?
Oh yeah. So I had been writing probably by 12 or 13, and we did an album. It wasn't like professionally released, but I had a band in high school, and we did an album. We were selling it at our shows, and we had self-recorded it with my 8-track. And so yeah, like I said, got started early.
All right, so let's talk about songwriting a little bit, because I think it's one of the keys to great artists. Most great artists at some point are also great songwriters. When you get an idea for a new song, where do you start?
It just depends. If I'm in the studio, then I'll open up Logic, and I'll open up a session, and the hardest thing is naming it, because it's an instrumental song, so it's like, what do I save this as? But then I'll pick, I'll usually grab the piano and maybe put on a drum groove, and so if there's already something in my head, then I'll start digging in that way. If I'm not at home, then I'm always using my voice memo app in my phone, and I'll just sing something into the phone and then translate it later on. Are
you singing words, or are you singing just melody, or what are you singing?
No, just melodies, because I don't really deal in lyrics. I do work with a lot of singers, but I myself aren't writing lyrics, at least yet. So no, I'm just humming kind of grooves and melodies, and kind of beatboxing if I need to, if there's a specific groove. And then also on my iPad, it's been really handy, GarageBand, just to get an idea down. I've used that many times on an airplane if I had an idea, and those songs have turned out to be really great songs. I have to go and reinterpolate them on my computer when I get home.
Sure.
But yeah, those are kind of my 3 ways. The main thing is getting the idea down. Like, relying on myself to remember something is just, forget about it, so I try to get it down as coherently as I can, and then come back to it if I have to. And then of course, if I'm in the studio, same thing, hopefully I'm not in a hurry, and I can really take my time, and because I have some shells of ideas. I'll open them up later, and I'm like, what is this? So I really, if I can, I try to get it down as coherently as possible, early, for sure.
Where do you find inspiration? From everywhere, or do you go to the same sort of well or wells all the time?
I listen to a lot of music, and my favorite way to do that, honestly, is in the car. I have a mixture of presets in my car of terrestrial radio and satellite radio, and so I have maybe 15 stations I really like. And so my wife, she really hates it when she's in the car with me, but I'm always constantly channel surfing the entire drive. I'm trying to find that next good song, and my stations are a mix of everything. I've got new R&B, I've got the contemporary jazz station, I've got the straight ahead station, old school R&B. There's one that has like kind of like this stuff, soft rock of the blue-eyed soul of the 70s. So I got all these stations, and sometimes a song will hit me, I'm like, oh my God, and then it'll make me think of a groove or an idea to do something. And sometimes a new song will pop up I've never heard, which is always exciting too, and that'll give me some ideas. So I'm always listening to music and really just kind of trying to stay energized and find new ideas for sure. And the other thing too is I don't want to ever, I definitely always have a hand in the past in terms of the grooves that I go to, but at the same time, I never want to get, antiquated or kind of stuck in a rut. So that's why I always have the new stations, also the pop station too, all of the new pop music, because I just want to incorporate that's been a really successful blend for me, is combining new with music of the 70s and the 80s. So, definitely important to stay relevant.
I think of part of the creative process is the discovery of things that don't work and then eliminating them from your bag, basically. What would you say that you've learned that you just know that you maybe originally thought this is going to be great, but now over time you've learned you're going to avoid that sort of thing all the time? Is there a certain groove? Is there a certain style, a certain tone that you just don't go to anymore?
That's a great question. I think the main thing is more conceptual than like a specific thing that I could mention. And the term, I've heard different people refer to it different ways, but the term I always remember is muso. And so it's like a way of describing something of how a musician would think of it as opposed to a listener. So as musicians, we get so caught up in the minutia of the specifics of the scales we're using and the harmony. And the average listener doesn't really absorb any of that. And so it's kind of like seeing, can you see the forest for the trees? It's yes, those elements are important. And yes, you want to have integrity and have sophistication in your music, but it also has to not completely just go over the heads of the listeners, So it's finding that balance of, yes, being sophisticated and saying strong with your artistry, but not losing the listener too. It's really easy if you get overly complicated with melodies and with rhythms and chordal structures. So it's just finding that blend, at the same time. You don't want it to be super watered down and obvious, so it's just walking that line of keeping it interesting musically, but that the listeners can enjoy it and access it as well.
Well, I think that what you're alluding to, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that what we think of as traditional jazz, we think of Miles Davis or John Coltrane, we think of that era of jazz as for many listeners to be challenging to their listening ability. And so it actually, some people fall away from it and some people gravitate toward it. I think what you're doing today, the contemporary jazz movement, is much more accessible. It feels much more in tune with other genres. Am I correct to say that, or do you think I'm wrong?
Well, I would just say that, kind of an aside to what you're saying, is I think everything from traditional jazz is incredible, but I also think that it's important to keep moving forward as well. So I think that's another thing too, is if you try to keep retreading the same tire, what is the point of that? I mean, even Miles himself was continuing to explore, going forward, and all of the amazing bebop he did, he moved away from that. He still kept elements of it, but then incorporated groove. And I think that's the great thing about jazz, is it is moving forward and we're trying new things. And so it is kind of funny. There's some people that arbitrarily draw a line and say after kind of blue, nothing else is jazz. It's just kind of an arbitrary thing, because the music back then was cutting edge, and people who like the music of the swing era were saying that bebop was noise, so it's kind of funny. It's like the line just keeps moving, and who says what is real and what isn't. But I think that's the main thing, is keep moving forward. But gosh, if Herbie Hancock can say, you know what, I want to have music that people can enjoy at a large scale, and he goes out and puts the Headhunters together and does Chameleon and all those great songs. That's what he was trying to achieve, was to have like a groove-based jazz. And he specifically wanted to have music that more people could enjoy. So if he can do that, I think I think the rest of us can too.
Well,
and no one is rewriting Herbie Hancock. I mean, he's still the GOAT.
No, he's amazing. Herbie Hancock's amazing.
Yeah.
Chick Corea, same sort of ballpark. Those folks are exceptional, and they actually do push the envelope forward. They push things forward. My own personal opinion, Kind of Blue is still cutting edge. It's still ahead of its time.
Of course, it's unbelievable. No,
it truly is unbelievable. All right, I want to talk about live performance a little bit.
Yeah.
What would you say are the biggest challenges, or the biggest challenge when you're going to do a live performance? What is the thing that gets your attention the most?
Oh, well, we talked about it a bit before. It's really everything but the music. The music, should be the easiest thing about it. It's the travel, flying, all of the logistics that go into that, advancing, getting the equipment together, flights, hotels and whatnot. So, but I enjoy it. I spend enough years on the road with other artists to see what works and what doesn't. And so I do all of that myself. I'm self-managed, and I'm my own travel agent and my own tour manager. And I really like having a finger on the pulse of it, just because I'm good at it. I know what to look out for, and also I've got my hands on the budget, so no one else is spending my money willy nilly. So, but no, I really enjoy it. It's so much fun. I do about 50 to 60 shows per year, and it's a lot of fun. I guess one challenge I could say is that most of us artists are using regional bands, and so so you send the music ahead of time, and then you grab musicians in the city that you're playing. But for the most part, it's been great. Now this is my 7th year on the road, so a lot of people around the country know my music, and I can just drop into a city and grab guys, and they've played for me many times before. So it's all about organization. So I have my all of my charts together. I've got all my live recordings of how the songs are played live, and send all those out, and we make it happen. Sometimes we rehearse, sometimes we don't, but the shows have all been a lot of fun. And so I embrace the challenge for sure.
Do you do a lot of improvising?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot. Now, there's not as much as if, let's say, I don't know how to I guess like in a traditional jazz setting, you'd play the melody and then most of the song would be improvising. So definitely my show is set up more, I guess like an R&B show. Definitely there's a strong emphasis on the melodies and the hooks and the verses, but then there's a lot of sections for improvisation as well. And I really like to do a mix of making sure to stay true to my melodies, but then I have quite a few songs that have extended solo sections, and I also make sure to feature everyone in the band too and let them cut loose at some point. So I enjoy it because that's what's so great about jazz is it's different every night, and it's a lot of fun to see where guys go with their improvisation, and it makes it exciting.
So you also program the evening, the order of songs and what you're going to play, yes?
Yeah, and I really make a point. I keep track of all of my set lists, and I make sure to really mix it up from year to year. I don't switch out everything, but I was looking at my show, like I'm doing the Catalina Jazz Festival, which is a huge festival here in Southern California, and I just wanted to double check. I had done it in 2018. And so I was like, let me just make sure I'm not doing the same show. And sure enough, about 50% of it is new from the last time I did it. So, I'm very organized with that. And the flow is really important. I want to come out really strong, really grab people, then of course, give them an intimate moment, maybe a solo guitar or a duet, me and my wife, she'll sing in the show, and just really hit a lot of different emotional moments. And it's very important.
Well, I want to explore this notion of flow in the show. I think it's important.
Yeah.
So you're purposefully setting the songs in an order in which you have an emotional change or roller coaster, or you're taking them through emotions by how you have ordered the songs. Yes.
Oh yeah, no question. Yeah. Like I said, I mean, you can count on the top of the show and the end of the show to have really high energy, be really engaging, really grab the audience. But then vice versa, you've got to have, more mellow, more contemplative points in the show, because otherwise, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. Mm-hmm. So, you could, if you hit people over the head for the entire show, it starts to lose its meaning. It all just sounds loud and in your face, instead of, really, grabbing their attention with a powerful ballad and then bringing the energy back up. So yeah, it's definitely very, very purposeful. And from show to show, I'm thinking about, okay, what worked, what didn't. I feel really good about my show right now. I've done about 25 shows since we got back from the shutdown, and really enjoying the sequence I have right now. And of course, you mix and match. Every show is not the same length. Sometimes it's a 45, sometimes it's a 60, a 75, a 90, a typical. So I definitely have a set of songs I'm going to do every show for the most part, and then there's others I'll mix in.
Do you think of yourself as a storyteller, that your music is telling a story?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I have people come up to me all the time, and they will say that to me. They say, man, I really, you really are one with your instrument and really tell a story. And so I'm honored that people feel that, because I'm definitely channeling that, no question.
So therefore the ordering of the music also tells a story. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Again, you want to find, I mean, it's kind of a cliche thing, but you think of like people on stools doing an acoustic number, and people put up the phone light or the cigarette lighter. But that's important. You gotta have an intimate moment and really grab people. You have to have the lows to gauge where the highs are. If you don't have that dichotomy, then it's really hard. At some point, the listener just tunes it out. It's hard for them to really, grasp what's happening if it's all monotonous.
Mm-hmm. So aside from the technical aspects of booking a tour, booking the other fellow musicians, preparing a set list, aside from those sort of technical aspects, what do you do psychologically to prepare for a gig? How do you prepare yourself to go on stage?
Yeah, it's nothing. I don't have anything, really crazy.
No ritual. You don't have a pre-show ritual you go through.
No, I always change my strings, because that gives me the best chance of making through without breaking one. So that's part of the ritual. If I can, I like to take a shower. I feel like I reset after sound check, but it's not always possible. Sometimes you sound check and then you're stuck at the venue, got to go straight to the gig. So I'm trying to think. I mean, it's nothing crazy. I try to eat a light meal, like half of a meal and not a full meal, because otherwise I'll be kind of full up there and kind of, lackadaisical. But yeah, there's nothing too crazy. I mean, I do enough shows where it becomes, it's more about, when I hit the stage, I just want to connect with the audience, connect with the band, and just thinking about kind of more of the logistics and, especially when you're on a festival, the timing is super important too. Different festivals, they'll want you to stick really close to your time limit and will kick you off stage if you're drastically over. So
sure.
I'm really, really cognizant of that throughout the show, and making sure I'm just hitting the moments I want to hit. And if I need to cut through, either cut a song or cut a song short to kind of get, because I definitely have a finale to the show that I want to have, pretty much, happen the way that I have it orchestrated. And so, I want to make sure that doesn't get cut off, because you'll see it sometimes where artists, they haven't even got to their, either their biggest song or something, and they're, oh, you're out of time, and it's a drag, not only for the artist, but for the audience too.
Sure.
So So I kind of have some wiggle room in the middle of the show too, that I'm always kind of thinking about, okay, this I can either chop out or shorten. So it's kind of more logistical, of just kind of, getting through the show and making sure to hit my marks.
So I haven't had the pleasure yet to see you live in performance.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering about is, do you only play your own work in live performance, or do you also play other artists?
No, I do a mix. Some of it's mostly original, definitely. I would say 70% original. Some of the other songs that aren't, usually they have a purpose, usually, like some of them I've recorded and are on my albums, even if they're not original songs, they are on my records. Sometimes we'll throw in a song to feature my wife that I haven't necessarily recorded, but it's just a nice vocal number to break up the show and kind of break up all the guitar and just have, feature her for 5 or 6 minutes. I also have a song by David Sanborn. I haven't recorded it, but it's a great tune. It's a great tune that it's a samba. It's a Latin jazz, high tempo, up tempo song, which is really nice. It breaks things up. It gives a chance for everyone to solo, feature the band. So on my longer shows, a lot of times I'll throw that in. So yeah, it's really like, again, I want to kind of hit a lot of different moods, a lot of different styles. And so, sometimes I'll grab a tune that's not necessarily an original song, but it's an original arrangement of mine, and I'll throw it in and just to kind of mix things up and keep it interesting.
Is there anything that's out there in the entire canon of music that you have yet to play that you are planning to, or that you want to play?
Oh gosh. That's a great question. Not at the moment, because I just put together this show that I'm doing in 2021, and I'm really happy with it. I've got new music from the new record, which just came out a few weeks ago, Risin Up, and then I've got favorites from my past records. So no, I just kind of put together the new show, so I'm excited about it. But definitely when I get to 2022, or possibly 2023 when the next record comes out, then I'll be looking to revamp the show again and try some new things.
Well, certainly anybody that has the opportunity to see you live, of what I've heard of your music, recorded, obviously, because I haven't seen you live. I think you should rush out to see Adam play for sure.
Oh, you're too kind.
So I've been talking to the exceptionally talented Adam Hawley for almost an hour now, and I'm just wondering, in all of your experiences, you've clearly met lots of people, you've been through lots of experiences on the road and so on. Can you share with us a story that's either quirky, strange, weird, oddball, or maybe just plain fun?
Oh yeah, no, I've had, you name it. I don't know if anyone out there has seen the movie Spinal Tap, but it's all about the misadventures of being on a rock and roll tour. So
it's got to be at 11. It's one high.
Right, exactly. So if you name it, it's happened to me. Everything in that movie plus anything else you can imagine.
Stonehenge, you had Stonehenge. You've had the little tiny set come down.
Well, it's not specifically Stonehenge, but definitely set mishaps for sure. But no, I think the oddest thing, or one of the most challenging things, was I was on tour with Jennifer Lopez, and we did her world tour in 2012, and it was a massive tour. It was 5 continents, and
wow,
and so
huge.
On every show, actually, I was mentioning a second ago about having the the candlelight moment, where you're on stools, the acoustic moment. And so we had that in that show, and I'd come forward and play acoustic guitar with her, and we'd do a duet. And so she was doing a costume change. So they made a whole thing out of me walking out. Like, that was a moment. And I would play like some romantic kind of flamenco guitar, and it was a whole thing. So, we would do this every night, but there was one night we went out there, and my guitar strap, which is it's a strap that locks in and keeps your guitar sturdy, came apart. And so in front of 20,000 people, I almost dropped the guitar just on, the stage. And so I caught it. And so then I had to try to keep playing, because all of the lights and the cameras, they're all on me. So I'm kind of hunched over, trying to hold the guitar. I'm trying to still play. Then I have to try to walk gracefully, sit down, on the stool, then make eye contact with her, and then it was one of the most harrowing moments I've ever had. And I did survive it, but it was just like, man, of all the times, I'm on stage for 90 minutes, of all the time for the strap lock to break, that was definitely one of the most harrowing. But no, all in all, that was a great tour. And gosh, we did, I don't even know. I'd have to go back and look how many cities we did. But like I said, 5 continents. It was like an 8-month tour. And so it was a lot of fun for sure.
Did she know as that was happening that you were in a little bit of trouble?
Well, she was still changing. So
I see.
I was literally the only, the whole stage goes dark and there's just
all
a
on
spotlight
you.
on me. Yeah. And so, and I'm struggling trying to hold up this guitar, still play. Oh my goodness. It was crazy. So, but no, she would come out after I was seated. So I'd already had most of my struggles by the time she got out there.
So she had no idea really until later.
No.
All right. Well,
wild.
Last question for you today, Adam. Do you have a solid piece of advice or a tip? I mean, you've already given us tons of great advice, but do you have a single piece of advice or a tip that you would lend to someone who's starting out in the business today, or maybe they're in a little bit and trying to get to the next level?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and this is advice I give to a lot of people, and I really believe it to be true, is a lot of up and coming musicians, or really anybody in any profession, they always talk about, it's political, it's who you know. And I always counter that, yes, that's 100% true. And so rather than being discouraged by it, I think to really embrace it. And it's all about your network and who you know. And so I'm a firm believer in whatever it is you want to accomplish. If you want to be a country guitarist, or you want to be a songwriter, or you want to do music and TV and film, you have to be around the people that are doing what you want to be doing, and ideally be around people that are successful, and you can kind of learn from them, glean from them, maybe get opportunities from them eventually. So for me, and this is not to say you have to do what I did, which was move to Los Angeles, but for my goals, that was one of the biggest things that I did to ensure my success. I was in Oregon. There's just not, it's a great place to grow up, but for the entertainment industry, there's just not a lot going on. So there's a lot of different options. I could, New York, Nashville, Atlanta, Chicago. But for me, growing up on the West Coast, LA wasn't that far. It's like a 2-hour flight and a 16-hour drive. So I went to college there and was able to build my network. And I did exactly what I mentioned. I got out and got to know people that were out touring as guitar players, and people that were teaching at the college level, and people that were recording. And, I'd pick their brain and go out and see them play, support them, go to jam sessions. And, it wasn't an overnight success, but, people start to get to know if you're, good guy, and if you do great work, and, word starts to spread. It's all word of mouth, so I think if I could summarize, I think it's just, surround yourself with good people, do great work all the time, no matter what it is. And, you'll see success follow from that. But it's definitely building your network for sure.
Well, that is extremely sound, solid, and useful advice. I can't tell you how much fun this has been, Adam. This has been a terrific hour on StoryBeat, and I can't thank you enough for joining me today and sharing your life and experiences and your art with all of us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
And as promised, we now have a real treat. Sit back, please, and enjoy Adam Hawley's incredible, beautiful song, Risin Up, off his album by the same name. And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. Story Beat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.